So, what if you could get a bezel-less phone for a budget price? Would you consider it? Or doesn't it float your boat to have a bezel-less display to begin with? Now, while the Doogee Mix isn't the only one doing this today, we are looking what the Doogee Mix is all about. At the moment of recording, this phone is 165 euros at Banggood.com, who is also the sponsor of this video, so be sure to check the link in the description if you are interested in this phone. So for 165 euros you get the following specs. The Doogee Mix has a Helio P25 CPU, 6GB of RAM, 64GB of internal memory which you can expand via microSD. Next to that it runs on Android 7.0. And it has a 3380 mAh battery. Now, while those specs are nice enough for the price that you are paying, this phone does cut corners when it comes to the display itself, with it only having a 720p. And that's below the standard. You would expect it to be a 1080p at least. The competitor of this being in the form of the Bluebear S1 does have a 1080p display. Now, does this mean that the display is bad? Well, of course you're going to have some pixels. With a 5.5 inch display you will see it. But as an average user it won't really bother you. This display gets bright enough and dim enough to enjoy your content on. And what is pretty good to see is that it's also protected with Gorilla Glass 5, which is pretty impressive for the price. Sure, if you pay a lot of attention to the display it might be better to look at the Bluebear S1 for instance, which at the moment of recording is actually the same price as the Doogee Mix. So let's talk about the design itself. I got myself this nice blue color and overall the phone looks pretty clean, but the way they designed it has some problems with it as well. Now, because of the bezel-less display, the front camera is placed at the bottom, which makes it awkward to shoot selfies. And more often than not you will probably have your hand in front of it until you are used to it. The phone itself feels good in the hand with having no sharp edges or anything, which is a solid job for a budget phone, because more often than not, on budget phones it's not aligned properly and you will have some sharp edges. However, in at least my review, the USB port is not centered at all, something I can't stand. It drives my OCD crazy. The funny thing is though, that the case is also made with this in mind. So I doubt I am the only one with this problem. What I do like is the contrast between the glass back and the blue frame itself. And the feeling of the frame makes me feel like it won't slip that easy. But I also have this somewhat weird feeling of it. It feels like it's a case or something. Now, because of the glass back though, you will see smudges on it like there's no tomorrow. It's crazy how fast you get those smudges on there. So be sure to have a cloth with you at any time, because this is truly a fingerprint magnet. Now at the back we of course find a pretty interesting dual camera setup. We have a 16 megapixel camera combined with an 8 megapixel camera. This is based on the Samsung ISOCELL sensor. And pictures that are taken on it when you get close to the subject are pretty good. Macro shots are really impressive. You can get pretty close to the subject and it will capture those impressive shots. And I love the depth of field that you get with that. It also allows you to control the light the moment you select the point of focus. It's a pretty easy and nice addition as well. But where pictures aren't that good is the moment that you are actually taking normal pictures, something you wouldn't expect to be worse than macro shots. The focus is all over the place, things are washed out. In this picture for instance, the white flowers are much too white, it's oversaturated and you can't even tell the details at all. At some parts it's properly focused with nice details, but at another part of the picture it's just a total mess. Which is weird because this makes it feel like a totally different camera when you look at the close-up shots. In close-up shots / macro shot it performs far better than you would expect, but in normal pictures it's not consistent at all. Now I'm not saying this is all of the time, because you can take some normal pictures, but it just seems odd that from time to time it has a hard time focusing properly when you are taking a normal picture. So I'm impressed with the camera, but at the same time I'm not. I just can't get over the fact of the difference between the macro shots and the normal pictures. I just wish the focus was done properly at the moment you are taking those normal shots. But let's take a look at the camera app itself. You slide where you want to go from different modes, and I truly love the Pro mode. It somewhat reminds me of the old Nokia Lumia devices, with the way you slide between the different settings. Albeit that the Pro mode is somewhat limited. What is annoying though, that you have to take so many steps to get where you want to go when you use the slide effort. But lucky enough, you can press between the different modes that are visible at that moment. Now what is a bit annoying is that the HDR mode is a separate mode itself, which it really shouldn't be, but in respect to that, the HDR mode isn't that bad, and it takes pictures much faster than the more expensive Xiaomi Mi 6. To get to the HDR mode, you simply press the settings buttons and then you have this HDR mode. In this same settings button, you can also find electrical image stabilization that should allow for more stable shots, but honestly it doesn't do much. Even on a pretty flat surface, it just isn't a stable shot. It seems to be slightly better than when it's off, but it can also be simply a difference in the way I walk. Now overall, this phone is a pretty good performer. You can play those intense games and I can't really fault the system by the speed itself. While it's a budget phone, it runs through everything pretty fast. Although where it does lack some speed is the fingerprint scanner itself. Now from time to time it does recognize your fingerprints fast enough, but the display takes a bit of time to go on after that. It's again not always the case, but it's funny how it recognizes your finger, but then just takes a couple of seconds to turn the screen on. The system itself, while seemingly being pretty clean, isn't my favorite though. I dislike this weird cat coming down when you unlock your phone, and I dislike the menu layout itself. Now when you press that kitten though, you actually go to the theme shop. This allows you to then customize your theme, which it honestly needs, because the standard one seems somewhat childish and I'm not a fan of it at all. So at the end, where do I stand with the Doogee Mix? Well, I somewhat have mixed feelings. The Doogee Mix is fast enough, it has a good enough battery life, and it allows you to play some heavy games. And you can take amazing macro shots with the camera. But when it comes to normal pictures, this camera isn't good enough for me. The focus is all over the place and it's pretty inconsistent. The display itself, while being only a 720p panel, is decent enough. It depends if you care about those pictures or not. For me, while I like having a nice display, it doesn't bother me that much. At the end, my question is to you. How do you feel about this device after this review? What are you most impressed with? And do you think this design works? Or would you rather have a normal form factor? For me, I'd rather have a normal form factor where everything is nicely centered and the front camera is on top. Either way, I'm ConceptsCreator and this was the review of the Doogee Mix. Of course, I will leave all the links in the description down below. And of course, don't forget to like this video, comment and of course subscribe. Have a good one.